It's not every day we get to talk about a TV show that is so faithful to the source material that it has the entirety of the internet singing praises from the rooftop. After the polarizing reactions to The Last of Us 2, this was a moment in time where all of the fans get to revisit this incredible chapter within this world that back in 2013 took the world by storm with its storytelling, its character development, its gripping tone, the vibe, and as a fan of The Last of Us, this was actually pretty incredible to watch live on Sunday. So I wanted to make a video discussing the first episode of The Last of Us on HBO. Now, I understand this isn't video games, but it's a form of entertainment that I think a lot of you guys consume, and in an effort to talk about more things that I'm actually enjoying within that video game sphere, I feel like this video is warranted. This intro is telling you to watch the show. Regardless if you're a fan of The Last of Us or if you've never played it, my no spoiler review here in this intro segment of this video is a 9.5 out of 10. From the characters to the set pieces and the acting, all of this is phenomenal. I think Pedro Pascal kills it in this role, but I actually think Bella Ramsey is going to be the star of this show. We're going to get into that later on in the video. There's only a couple of things that I think could have been done a little bit better, but we're going to get into that later on after this intro. Spoilers ahead, watch the episode, then come back here and we're going to discuss it in the comments. If you guys end up liking this video, let me know down below and maybe I'll return and do a video for episode 2. My name is Big Fry and let's talk about The Last of Us. So, first things first, the cold open. Doctors back in the 60s are discussing the spread of infection with some scientific data and discussion. I thought it was a really nice opener to kind of set the stage for how this show could possibly be grounded in reality. The intro to this series starts off a lot slower than the game does, but it actually adds a lot of backstory and context to characters like Sarah. It shows her take her dad's watch and get it repaired, which we saw in the game, but we didn't actually get to see her going to the watch store to get it repaired, and all of these things kind of starting to pop off in the background. And it also introduces us to a couple of neighbors who don't last too long in the show. It shows what kind of hard worker Joel is, working late to make sure he has the money to pay the bills. It also shows what kind of relationship him and his daughter have a little bit more than the game did. It's a more friendly relationship, and I'm sure with the mother out of the picture, it's made them both a lot more independent, and you actually really get to see that relationship dynamic a lot more early on. One of the first big changes from the game to the show is what happens when Sarah wakes up and things are about to pop off. She's alone. Joel isn't even near the house. He had to go bail Tommy out of jail. Sarah goes outside to the beginning of all of this chaos and then sees the neighbor's dog, who is so scared it just gets the hell out of Dodge. The neighbors are in turmoil. The old lady has bitten the shoulder of the husband and is eating the caretaker in the kitchen. And at this point, as somebody who played the game and knew how Sarah died, I actually thought they were going to do it in a different manner, and I actually would have welcomed it, but of course she makes it out, and it kind of just begins the parallels to the game. The truck scene, and you guys know what I'm talking about, it's one shot taken from the perspective of Sarah kind of moving around all of the chaos and all of the conversations. They nailed it. It honestly felt like I was playing the game for the first time again. The one thing that I loved about this scene was the plane crash, but then seconds later, the camera focuses on like this little piece of shrapnel that flies and hits the truck, and then all of a sudden there's a crash. It felt a little disjointed that they focus on one piece of metal flying. It kind of made it seem like it caused the entire accident, which was just a little disjointed for me. Regardless, Tommy and Joel have to split up. Sarah's ankle is wrecked, and then of course we get the big scene that everybody was kind of anticipating. And I gotta say, man, I have played that scene countless times. I've seen it, I've watched reactions to it on YouTube. Regardless, every single time I see it, it punches me in the gut, and I was crying like a baby. I don't understand why it hits me so hard every time. The one thing I wish we would have seen right there was the actual soldier who had the gun to them actually say, but, you know, there's a kid here. Something like that to make it a little bit more impactful. A lot of it was just, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And you kind of knew what was going on, but there wasn't really that human element outside of him kind of apologizing and saying sorry. Regardless, it was still a perfectly executed scene. And then we get 20 years in the future. So the show's actually set in like present time, 20 years after the fact. So it's set in 2023, which was the first major change. Obviously, the game came out 10 years ago and it was set in 2013. We're now 20 years into the apocalypse instead of 10, which is going to be a little bit interesting because the game takes place 10 years after the start of the apocalypse. So it was a lot more reasonable to believe that Ellie would have been born around the time that this whole thing was kind of popping off. But now in this show, we're going to have Ellie born in the middle of this. I think she's only, what, like 14, and they're 20 years later. So to me, logically, it doesn't make sense that she was born in the middle of the apocalypse with everything going on and she still has this cure. Maybe they're not even really going to explain it. I don't know. But with this, we're introduced to the camp 20 years later that Joel and other characters like Tess are working in. We're introduced to characters like Marlene, and I have to say right off the bat, shout out to the team who gave the actual voice actors their on-screen roles. These actresses killed it in their roles, and it's nice to see that voice actors are getting the credit they deserve for creating these characters in the first place. We also know that Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker are going to have roles in this show in the future, and I'm very excited that voice actors are actually getting that kind of credit, so kudos to the team. Of course, it wouldn't be a show on the internet without controversy. One of the big points is the fact that Sarah's character was gender swapped. She was obviously white in the game, but is black in the show. I also know that in the game, Joel was Chilean, from what I understand, but with Pedro's Joel, he's actually Latino. So for me, it didn't really take away from anything. The intro's impact was still incredible since we don't even really see the mother at all. Honestly, I thought Nico Parker killed it as Sarah, so I don't know. That's just my opinion. The first episode ran almost an hour and a half, and I was in it the entire time. From the Firefly introduction to the inner workings of the camp to the escape. I'm loving everything about this show. It's stuck so close to the source material that it almost feels like a sign of respect. I thought Pedro's version of Joel was a lot less gruff and a little bit more reserved, a little bit more cunning, but there are moments when I see it and I'm like, nah, that's Joel, dude. And then we obviously get introduced to Ellie. Bella Ramsey, who I know very well from Game of Thrones, she took a lot of shit early on for the casting because she doesn't look like Ellie at all. And you know what? She showed everybody that looks don't always make the character. If there's anyone that's pulling off Ashley Johnson's Ellie, it's her. The attitude, the inflections on the voice, the spunk, she nailed it. There were two parts that sold it for me. The first one was when she was being thrown into the room and she's like, wait, what the fuck? And it sounded exactly like Ellie. The second one was when Joel was beating the officer to death who kind of cornered them outside escaping the camp. Her face was just glued to that beating. She was watching Joel defend her. It was a mix of disgust, intrigue, and respect all at once. She had zero lines during that beating, but you could see Ellie on her face. She is going to be the star of this show. She did so great in Game of Thrones. It was a smaller role, but when she was on screen, it was super impactful. This is going to be her breakout role, and I think she's going to make a lot of people happy with her portrayal of Ellie. Now let's talk about the biggest change in the show versus what's going on in the video game, and this is a pretty controversial change, and as a fan of The Last of Us, I still don't know how I feel about it yet. So the thing that we're finding in the show is that it's no longer about spores. It's not, airborne virus. You don't breathe it and become infected. We're now kind of moving into these tendril things, which is what we saw from the old lady who was kind of eating the caretaker. She looked up and there's all these little tendrils kind of sticking out of her mouth. And so it's now more about kind of a more basic zombie kind of infected where they have to bite you in order to kind of get you infected. Neil Druckmann has already addressed this in an interview with Collider, and he says the game had spores in the air and people had to wear gas masks, and we decided early on that we didn't want to do that for the show. Eventually those conversations led us to these tendrils, and then just thinking about how there's a passage that happens from one infected to another, and like fungus does, it could become a network that is interconnected. It became very scary to think that they're all working against us in this unified way, which was a concept I really liked that got developed into the show. And I'm guessing they don't want everybody wearing hazmat suits and gas masks. They actually want to have more of a human element in the storytelling so you can see when people get infected R-rated, it's a lot more gruesome, it's a lot more violent, and it's a lot more hard-hitting. So for me, it really has to depend on how they pull it off. The old lady at the beginning biting the husband and stuff, it looked brutal. The blood trail in the kitchen, I'm here for it. I just actually would have really enjoyed a show that did more with spores and airborne viruses, kind of like what The Last of Us does. I thought that that was a really unique take on zombies. Now, we have seen a little bit of like the future and some of the zombies that are kind of crawling out of these holes that are chasing the characters and stuff. We'll have to see how it goes. I don't think it's going to be a problem at the end of the day because this show is going to be focusing way much more on these characters and the storytelling. But those action sequences were some of the best things about The Last of Us. So we'll just have to see what happens. Last of Us, HBO, there were a couple things that bugged me about it. The metal shrapnel, the fact that they crashed into this other car and then just couldn't walk around and kind of regroup. It was a little bit strange. Obviously, they wanted to make it as close to the video game as possible. And after some of the shit that we've seen from like video game adaptations coming to either movies or TV, this was easily one of the best, if not, I'm trying to think, I think this is the best video game adaptation to screen that I have seen yet. And I cannot wait for episode 2. I'm going to be following along. And if you guys like this video, I'd love to cover more of it and talk about it with you guys. After Better Call Saul ended, we got House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, and those are both great TV shows. I don't think I've been excited for a show since those ones have ended. This is my new one. We also have Legend of Vox Machina Season 2 coming out this week. There's a lot of good stuff on the horizon, and there's not really a lot to talk about in the gaming space, so I would love to be able to do more videos like this. But again, it all depends on if you guys actually want this kind of content. So leave a comment down below and let me know. And if you guys do enjoy it, leave a like on it. And if you haven't subscribed already, do so. The button is down below. As always, guys, my name is Big Fry, and personally, The Last of Us is a must-watch TV show. If you are a fan of the video games, even if you're not, I really think you're gonna like it. It is such high quality. I think the budget for this show is somewhere around $100 million. We have 9 episodes in the first season, and holy hell, it is great. My name is Big Fry. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.